This is what happens when a cop completely ignores the Constitution and enter a tyrant state. Because out of nowhere, this cop stopped this man and started accusing him of shoplifting.
So what'd you just steal from the store?
You stole nothing, bitch.
Well, how come you were beeping?
I don't fucking know.
You're not free to go.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not free to go.
This man even passed through the scanner to show the cop that he didn't steal anything. But the tyrant here wasn't letting this slide, so he changed the story.
So who's your buddy that's with you then?
None of your business.
Well, it is my business because you're here complicit with him.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah, you were.
No, I wasn't.
Officer then detained the man in the context of further investigation and called for backup.
You're not free to go.
I'm free to go, bro. I did not do nothing wrong.
Have a sit.
After watching his rights being violated, this man lost his cool.
What? What else you want, bro? I didn't steal nothing.
Bro, you got problems.
And if that wasn't enough, the backup team assaulted the man while arresting him without any investigation. Meanwhile, the sergeant himself went to the store to check the footage, and when he couldn't find anything against him, he decided to trespass the man for nothing.
You're not trespassing me nothing, homie.
Oh, no, they want
Talk about controlling a conversation first, because controlling a conversation is very closely tied with asking effective questions or asking what you might call better questions. So controlling a conversation is first about understanding who's actually in control of a conversation. Most people think the person in control of a conversation is the person who talks the most. In reality, the person in control of a conversation is the person who asks the most questions. So in our interview together, Doug, who's in control of this conversation?
I am.
You are. That means that you can control what we talk about next. You can control how long the conversation lasts. You can control my energy level in this conversation because you control the questions. When you ask a question, you can decide whether that question takes us in a new direction, takes us deeper into the same direction, whether that question takes us in a direction where I am interested and excited, or whether it takes us into a direction where I'm less interested and maybe more mellow. So it's super important for anybody out there who wants to learn how to control a conversation. The secret sauce is talk less and ask more questions.
Welcome back, everybody. As many of you guys know, I'm a law enforcement trainer instructor. I train and instruct military and law enforcement all over the country on various law enforcement disciplines to include constitutional law, case law, patrol tactics, use of force. I'm also a FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, critical communication and de-escalation instructor. And so I want to talk about communication, and I want to talk about why law enforcement needs to be better at communication and kind of where we fail with law enforcement and communication. But before I do that, I need to put some disclaimers out there. I just want you guys to know that these opinions I'm going to articulate and present to you, these opinions are mine and mine alone. They are not at all representative or demonstrative of any law enforcement agency or affiliate I've ever worked for in the past, worked with in the past, or will work for in the future, or work for currently. So I just want to make that very, very clear. These opinions are mine and mine alone, and they're, again, not meant to represent anybody else but myself. And so the big reason for that disclaimer is I believe, based on the people I've talked to in the past and what I know, 99% of you are probably going to agree with me. If you're not law enforcement, 99% of you guys are probably going to agree. This is going to be controversial, but it's going to be controversial to law enforcement only. The only people that have ever had not agree with me when it comes to this are other law enforcement, and so that's just what it is. You know, when you talk about things that kind of rock the criminal justice boat, that's what you play. That's what you get. So again, that's why I say this. Again, most of you guys, especially those of you that are not law enforcement, I think by and large, I think you'll agree with me. I think if you are law enforcement, chances are more likely than not, you're probably not going to be happy with what I have to say. But again, I'm speaking truthfully. I'm speaking my truth, and my truth is based upon my training, my experience, and the peer-reviewed data that's out there. And so with that in mind, let's get started. There are really three different things that I think we have to really talk about and understand when we're talking about communication and why law enforcement are not the best at communication by and large, or why they can at least get better. And the first thing I have to say is training. When I say train, I mean there's a lack of communication training and communication skill training. Now, a lot of law enforcement organizations and agencies, the first thing they're going to say is, well, in our in-service trainings, we talk about de-escalation. We talk about it. We do drills. We do scenario-based training on de-escalation skills. and de-escalation communication. And then your academies, your service academies are going to say the same thing. And cool, bravo. But just because you put, in my opinion, just because you put communication and de-escalation words in the outline of your training doesn't mean that somebody's getting good communication training, okay? And the big reason why I say that is because I have gone to these instructors. I've been to a ton of, at least the ones that are available. I've been to a lot of communication de-escalation courses. I've been to a lot of trainings, and unfortunately, you go up to most of these FTOs, field training officers. You go up to most of these trainers and you ask them, if you have a cop buddy that's a friend or a family member that's a cop, or somebody in law enforcement that you respect, trust, and you believe is very smart and intelligent on their job, ask them, do you have good communication training? And if they tell you that they do, ask them this basic, simple question: what principles of communication do you use in your everyday training? Like, what principles? And if they just tell you, well, I use de-escalation, that doesn't do anything for me, right? So what principles of de-escalation do you use, right? What communication skills, principles, doctrines do you use, right? What are the skill-based building blocks behind your de-escalation or your critical communication training? The fabric of why you do what you do, what are they? What are the founding principles? They're going to look at you like they have no idea what you're talking about. And for those of you that, for example, are communication majors, you get exactly what it is that I'm saying. So those of you that have advanced degrees in communication or have taken communication courses or are interested in communication, you understand exactly what I'm saying, because there's a science to this, right? That there's a reason why there's advanced degrees in communication, because there's a lot of nuance and there are standards for this. And so that's what a lot of people don't realize is our service academies, our police academies are barely talking about Supreme Court case precedences as they relate to basic standards, right? They may touch very briefly on plain view doctrine or touch doctrine or vehicle inventory, vehicle search doctrine, right? They may go touch very loosely, very quickly on state law ordinances, stuff like that. By and large, though, they're not talking about the Constitution, by and large. They're not talking about Supreme Court case precedences that allow us to do our job and why we can do what we can do, and when we can do it and why we can do it. So a lot of these service academies, again, I go to trainings all the time where, I'll talk to other police trainers. I'll talk to field training officers. I'll talk to people that are lieutenants and captains, Do you know what reasonable articulable suspicion is? Like, give me a definition of what that is. What does case law say it is? Where is that found in case law? They have no idea. So when officers are barely meeting this mark of actually understanding the doctrine that allow us to enforce and do our job, you can't and then they barely meet those parameters. If they do, now you're expecting them to give you principles of communication, right? And so I understand that that it is what it is, and I'm not saying that that's right. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that's the reality. And so let me answer the question, right? Since I said it, so I have to be fair. So if you ask me what principles of communication I like to use and what I talk about, me personally, I'm a really big fan of Cialdini's principles of persuasion. I think when we're talking about things, and again, the best course I ever took was the FLETC critical communication de-escalation course, because they talked about it's a science-based approach. I mean, the instructor course I took was taught by the FLETC Behavioral Health Unit. I mean, these are law enforcement special agents that have been in law enforcement 20, some over 30 years, and they have advanced degrees in psychology. These people know what they're talking about. So if you are asking me, when I do in-service training, when I do one day or 2 day training, I talk about Cialdini's principles of persuasion, because I believe when we're talking about law enforcement and we're talking about the function that we do, I believe having the understanding of how to influence human behavior by making persuasive and effective arguments and effective communication through the physiological aspects of persuasion, I think the science is there. I know the science is there. That's why I utilize those in my everyday life, whether it's professional or personal. Like having these collaborative skills, persuasion skills, I think are very, very important, because let me be honest with you, I'm not a social worker. Okay, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. So me trying to use de-escalation skills based upon a professional standpoint, to me, makes no sense. Me utilizing persuasion skills based upon science-based reasoning of principles that are known to work in real life, like Cialdini's principles of persuasion, that does make sense to me. So again, number one, officers just don't have a lot of training in communication. They don't know what they don't know. And again, for those of you that are in fields that require you to take advanced courses on communication, or those of you that have a communication degree, journalism communication degree, you totally get what I'm saying. So that's number one. Number two, the training that is out there, I don't believe in a lot of it. I don't think the training that is out there on communication and de-escalation, by and large, I don't trust it. I'm a firm believer that there's no reason why we need to replace hard set skills that work, officer safety skills, tactics, right? Safety tactics. I don't see any reason to get rid of hard tactics that work for officer safety and replace them with some kind of softer, gentler communication de-escalation show. I don't believe in that. It's not something that I agree with. So why are a lot of these courses doing that? And one of them, right? And let me just call it out because I've already stood in front of the chief's office on this one. So it is what it is. Everybody that knows me professionally knows, where I fall in line. For example, I am not a huge fan of CIT training, crisis intervention team training. I've been certified in as instructor. I was certified in CIT training back when I was in the military, back in the military days. It's been a while. I've been around for a while. I'm just not a big fan in some of the skill sets that the communication concepts they talk about in CIT. I'm not a fan of it. Now, with that being said, there's some great instructors out there that are good communicators, whatever. I'm not taking that away from anybody. If you like it, do it. Again, this is just my opinion. When it really comes down to it, and again, what I was, from one of the first things that the FLETC instructor said, it resonated with me, and my ears were 100% open after the first 5 minutes, because the first thing that they brought up and the first thing they mentioned in that FLETC instructor course is you are not a counselor. And these are guys that have advanced psychology degrees and have been special agents, been in law enforcement, again, 20 plus years, a whole career in it. You're not a counselor. You're not a doctor. You're not a psychiatrist. You're not a therapist. Okay? You don't know the DSM-5. Big old book, right? DSM-5 talks about all the processes of mental health, things like that. It's a big book. I don't know it. You can't open the DSM to any random page and expect me to know what's on it. I don't know the DSM. So stop pretending like you're a counselor, right? Stop pretending that you're a therapist. Stop pretending that you actually understand these mental health processes and how the person in front of you that might be suffering from one of these mental health processes is processing the information you're giving them, right? That made complete sense to me. And the last thing they said is don't let your hard skills go away because you're talking to somebody, right? Don't give up officer safety in lieu of some kind of communication skill set that's taught in a CIT course. 100% agree with that, right? Again, I think CIT is important in the aspect of connecting people with professionals. 100% agree. If you can get, a social worker on scene that can talk the person down, great. If you have those resources and those abilities to do that, and you want to connect people that are sick or people that need help with professionals, 100% all about that. But somehow trading tactics and trading good science-based approaches for this CIT soft skill concept, again, not something I agree with. Now, utilizing science-based approaches of art of persuasion to persuade people, that is a de-escalation skill all of itself. And so how are these skill sets science-based and how they work? Well, let's think about it. Anybody that's in sales, some of the best salesmen in the world, they are masters at persuasion. They are masters of influence, and they're masters at manipulation. They are able to use psychological triggers to get you to do and influence you into doing what you want. And it was perfectly talked about by Mr. Bustamante, the former CIA special agent that you saw there at the very beginning of the video. He talks about these skill sets. Like, the CIA uses these skill sets. People at the highest levels of sales use these skill sets. So people that use this stuff in real life, they utilize these skill sets. And as police officers, we're talking to people all the time, and there's no training in this, right? Unless you are actively seeking out this training, there's no training in this. And I get it, right? You know, lots of agencies they're down on funding, they're down on people, and officers don't get to go to a lot of trainings. And so when an officer finally can go to a training, I can tell you they're not jumping up and down to going to the CIT training. They're not jumping up and down to go to whatever communication de-escalation training is out there. Especially the ones that want to work, you know where they're going? They're going to drug interdiction courses. They're going to firearms courses. They're going to defensive tactics courses. They're going to the latest and greatest dope course, right? Those are the courses they're going to. Or if they're wanting to lay back and have a good time, they're going to the SRO conference, the School Resource Officer Conference. And I've been there. I've been to it week long. It's great. If you want to have fun and relax and network and hang out and talk with people and not do a whole lot, like the SRO conference, it's great. Great networking, great food. It's fun. You know, people are hanging out. Even after the training's over, people are going out having a good time. I hate to break it to you. You can say whatever you want about school resource officers. You can say whatever you want about SROs. Cool. I don't care. The conferences are great. They put money into those things, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is when funding is down, people are not jumping up and down to go to a communication and de-escalation course. And the ones that are there, again, I'm not saying don't do it, but if the officer does not believe and does not have, there's no merit in what's being taught, and they don't trust those skill sets, and they don't trust what they're learning, they're not going to implement it. And again, if you have CIT and you love it, use it. I'm not saying don't. But when we're talking about, you know, being in the thick of things, right? It's important for officers to realize, you know, you're not a therapist. You're not unless you are certified in it, you're not a counselor. The DSM-5 is really big. It's really thick. There's a lot to it. So instead of me trying to pretend that I am this professional, why don't I stick to the hard skills that actually work? The science-based persuasion principles, right? Again, just my opinion. Lastly, the third big reason why law enforcement kind of fail in the communication department that I have seen is because we have that trump card, right? Law enforcement has the trump card. They have the badge, they have the tool belt. And if they're enforcing a law, right? They have the lawful authority to enforce the law. They're backed by Supreme Court case precedents. So if I have probable cause to make an arrest, I can make that arrest. Whether you want to submit or not, I can make that arrest and use a reasonable amount of force in order to make that arrest. Connor v. Graham, right? Well, that's the trump card because that becomes a crutch. I can do it because I have the lawful authority to do it, becomes a crutch to officers when it comes to communication. Why have to practice and get better at the art of communication when I'm lawfully justified to put you into custody, right? Why would I exercise those muscles that I don't need to exercise because I can use force to do what I need to do? It's a very bad concept. It's very, in my opinion, not a helpful ideal, but it's an ideal that we see every day. It's happening every day in the United States. And so when you are going into something knowing no matter what happens, you have the lawful authority to do what you want to do, it can make you kind of lackadaisical, right? Now, let's compare this to somebody else that has to have good communication skills that doesn't have that trump card. Car salesman. Whether you like him, hate him, whatever, I don't care. But as a car salesman, right, a lot of car salesmen that are very successful are very good at influence. And the reason why they're good at influence is because they literally need to be good at communication. They need to be good at influence to feed their families. Because if they can't do it, they're not going to be in that field very long. So the ones that have made a lifetime in that field, you know why they're really good at influence? Because they've had to depend on that skill to literally feed their family, right? Why does the CIA spend so much time, money, and effort in these communication skills? You know, why is it that these CIA agents, right, former CIA agents like Bustamante, why is it that when they get out of the CIA and they start doing these contracting jobs and consulting jobs, right? When they start doing these consulting and training, that's what they open. They open a consulting training firm that talks about communication, right? If you look at Busamante's, what he's most popularly known for, it's these communication soft skills that he teaches, right? Why does he do that? Because he's been taught so well at such a high level. In order to be in the CIA, you're taught at such a high level influence, at such a high level, the art of persuasion, the psychological triggers, how to understand, manipulate information, how to understand manipulation, communicate that information, etc. Why they have to be so good? Because their lives literally depend on it, right? If you're in another country, if you're especially in a foreign hostile country, your ability to communicate and your ability to influence people becomes super important, because if you don't, you're going to die. Right? As a CIA agent, you just don't have this trump card while you're in a foreign, adversarial land. Like, you have to be good at talking, because if you're not, you're going to die. You have a high propensity of mortality, right? But with law enforcement, we talk to people all the time. But again, that shield and that tool belt becomes a crutch. And so when you look at the science, right? When you look at the people who are really good at influence, that are really good at communication, they are so because their livelihood and or their life, or both, depend on being good communicators. With law enforcement, that's not the case, because guess what? I have the lawful authority to put you in handcuffs. I'm going to get as many people here, and we're going to use as much reasonable force as we need to make that happen. When that is the idea, and when that is the approach, yeah, I can see why communication is not your best forte. Now, with that being said, there are great law enforcement. Some of the best communicators I've met have been law enforcement. And a lot of those guys, the reason why they're so good is because their livelihood did depend on it, right? Their life did depend on it, right? Especially a lot of these law enforcement officers that had other career paths, that had other life experience, right? If you have a ton of life experience and then you come into law enforcement, I know one guy, he's a plumber. Great cop, great communicator, right? Great communicator. He knows people very well, but he was a plumber, right? So he had a ton of life experience coming in to law enforcement. And then when he went into law enforcement, he worked gang unit, he worked major crimes. So yes, he's had, especially if you're working gang unit or you're working in a place that's very hostile, you have to be a good communicator because your life literally depends on it. And so by and large, those skill sets matter. And so, again, I'm not saying that all law enforcement are bad communicators, because again, some of the best communicators I've met have been law enforcement. But the reason why they become really good is because they invest time, and by and large, they're in positions and they're in special law enforcement units and teams that require them, because they may not have backup right there. But then again, you see in this video, right? They are at a grocery store. They were easily able to get more officers than they had suspects, and you see very quickly how that turned out and how they treated and how the communication broke down immediately. And so if you look at this, it's very simple. To me, it's a very simple concept. Number one, again, lack of training. They don't know what they don't know. They have no communication skills and training. Number two, the communication skills and training that is out there, by and large, I believe is subpar. I do. I'll say it. It is what it is. My opinion, my belief. You don't like it, that's fine. But a lot of these communication trainings and skill sets and de-escalation training that are out there are just, they're not that great. They're not that great. They're not the best quality. And then three, again, if you let the badge and the tool belt, the gun belt be a crutch, it will be a crutch. So those are the top three reasons why I think law enforcement fail in the communication department. But that's just my personal beliefs. What matters to me is what you guys think. What do you guys think? Do you think I got this right? Do you think I got this wrong? You tell me. You tell me why you think law enforcement are not the best communicators. You tell me what you think that law enforcement should do. Do you think that law enforcement should take more science-based approaches? What do you think is the big takeaways here when we're talking about law enforcement and communication? I'm very curious to see what you have to say in the comment section below. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you guys like this content, please like, share, subscribe. And as always, guys, long live the Republic.